Hi, Misha here.
And this is J-Ro.
And this is a couple of weeks late, but we promised to do Q&A over the holidays. Apparently, holidays now includes Martin Luther King Day because, yeah, I ended up having to extend it out. Had a little bit of case of illness floating around that postponed it. And a little bit of personal scheduling. And then, as I talked about it in a few videos and on the Patreon, the ATF came to do their regular inspection, so that took a week of my life.
That must have been a hoot. It
was interesting. Apparently, according to them, I don't really have a gun problem, but I have a cat problem. I don't know what they're talking about.
Although I guess if the ATF shows up and they say you don't have a gun problem, that's what you want to hear.
Yeah, I would imagine. But they wouldn't take any of the cats. I offered to let them confiscate Earl.
Oh, don't give up Earl.
Have you met Earl?
I have met Earl. We'll probably meet Earl here in a little bit.
Yeah, he'll probably be chewing on one of your cables before too long. Anyway, this is Patreon number 20, and the holiday one, and we're going to get to it. Have some questions, as usual. A $1 a month donation on Patreon. You can ask as many questions as you like. We routinely do these roughly every 3 months. $5 and up and $10 and up have their own tier questions. And that's actually where we're going to begin, is with a $10 contributor. He called his question in, and it was pretty straightforward about Swiss guns. He was asking if on the 751s, if this was loose on any of my guns. And by this, he meant this small spring detent. That's there to put tension on, to adjust gas settings, either 2 or 4. It's also there if you press it in, the spring-loaded detent, to fully disassemble, which I'm not going to do here right now. But he was saying on his 751, it felt kind of loose, but he said the gun runs great and hadn't had any issues. And I pointed out that you don't want this too tight up here, because when it's new, it might be loose, but after some carbon fouling, especially if you run a suppressor, which I would imagine a lot of people are doing on the 751s, it can get overly tight. So I suggested, as long as it's not an issue, don't worry about it. But I thought I would talk about it here. If anyone else thinks that their 751 spring detents are loose or their gas regulators are loose, let us know in the comments so he can maybe feel better or feel worse. But again, he said there was no issues.
I mean, I guess if it runs, it runs. That's
kind of my thought. Yeah, if it works, it works. And I thought that was also a good segue to talk about upcoming Swiss guns. Last Friday, as we record this, JDI Sand Imports announced a new batch. Now, this one's not from it, of course. They're still over in Switzerland. This is one of the last batch that came in December. This is a 551 ALUS, one of the STANAG mag factory versions. Only 15 of these came in. Pretty cool. It's a different style of machined aluminum alloy, lower than the US SIGs had. Anywho, kind of a unique gun that came in last time. This time, according to Dave, about 110 guns will be coming in, roughly speaking, in March. Of those, 40 are 751s with 16-inch barrels. They will be cerakoted gray, and they'll have a cerakote matched quad rail, military style handguard. That's pretty neat. The 751s and 7.62 NATO. There will also be, I think I said 40 there, I'm wrong. That was 20 of those. 40 are the 553Rs. So, sorry about that, going off memory. It's late in the day. 40 will be the 553Rs, which are the 7.62 by 39s. And this time it looks like they'll be black metal and green furniture. The last batch were black on black, and before that they were black on green. So that's what's going on there. And the remaining, give or take 50, are all going to be 553 variants in 556. And there's going to be some neat configurations. There will be one that's cerakoted gray with an alloy lower, so there'll be a cerakoted lower. And it'll have green furniture. That'll have a 1/2 by 28 threaded muzzle, 8.9 inch barrel, and the 1 in 7 twist, so kind of a STANAG style, but it'll still take Swiss mags. Another one will be with a steel lower, black metal, and green furniture. It'll have the same 8.9-inch barrel, but it'll have the 1 in 10, so the Swiss twist rate, and it'll be threaded 14x1 left hand, presumably capped with the 3-prong flash hider, and that'll have a pick rail. The one that I thought was kind of neat too, there'll be one that's black steel with black handguard, 8.9-inch barrel, threaded 14x1 left hand, and it has diopter sights. So that's kind of a neat configuration. I don't know exactly the breakdowns on the 5.53s, but with 50 total, you're looking at, 10, 15 of each one probably. But yeah, excited for that next batch to come in. Hopefully there will also be other accessories, magazines, and what have you.
Yeah, you always seem to have a pretty good line on stuff that's coming in, and get while the getting's good.
Yeah, the small boutique things. I know he posted them on his website, Facebook, whatever, and they sold out essentially that day.
Oh, sure.
So with the small batch, because the last batch that came in, this was part of, was about 350 pieces. The one from earlier was roughly 600 pieces, so 110 is a pretty small number. But when JDI got started, they were importing 50 guns at a time, so it is up from when it started out with 6 years ago. Alrighty, so our first question is actually from Chris Bartocci over at Small Arms Solutions. Well, a couple of questions actually.
Yeah, it looks like he sent a few over this morning to kind of weigh in. He wants to know, will we see a commercial GROT?
So the GROT would be the new name, but the MSBS from FB Radom has been going under. It's not a hard no, but it's kind of one of those not right now, because right now FB, well, as you probably noticed with like the Beryls, they can barely produce any semi-autos for us at all, much less something new. Pretty much all their GROT resources are going into supplying the Polish border guard, the Polish army, maybe police. So it could happen. I don't even think a semi-automatic only version has been submitted to the ATF Tech branch for approval even. So if we do, we're looking at years out. But at least there's an importer for FB stuff. Arms of America is still very much doing that. In fact, a batch of Beryl 7.62s was just released. So.
Okay, his next question, and this is one I may have a bit to contribute on, is what is the best pistol caliber carbine, in your opinion?
And it really is just an opinion, and it is a field that I'm really happy has kind of gotten a lot of attention, and it is of interest. It's great to be able to shoot something affordable that anyone can shoot, and yeah, I would say for a pistol caliber, I really like 9mm. It's just such a universal. You can get so many different loadings: hot, mild, hollow point, FMJ.
Sure.
I thought about it, and I almost picked the CZ Scorpion Evo 3. I really like that one for how simple it is.
Yeah.
And it's a military tested gun. I also have to give some credit to the SiG MPX. Even though I had some teething problems early on, it's probably one of the most gentle shooting options out there. But I will kind of ding the MPX a little bit for being more of a police grade gun versus military. It doesn't seem to quite be as durable. It needs a little more maintenance and maybe has a few more parts that can on you compared to the Scorpion. So in the end, I picked this one. The Kalashnikov USA. This is my KR9. Of course, there's the KP9.
KP9, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It is, well, not a...
I would have bet money you were going to pick the KP9.
Yeah, it's, this stock is really stiff when you're sitting here on the table. But I will do it. Yeah, you see, even now, all these years, the stock is nice and tight.
Yeah.
Seems to be. There we go. It's just the angle, the sharp angles. But had it for several years. reliable. It's kind of purpose built to be a 9mm. Sure, it's Kalashnikov inspired, but this receiver is shortened for a 9mm. The mag well is for a 9mm. Cost is fine. It is a tested gun, at least the Vityaz, the Russian military's version of. It's based, of course, on the Sega 9. And I really like how soft shooting it is, either the pistol or the rifle. It just...
I think that's the appeal for most people.
Yeah.
Pistol caliber carbines is, you know, you barely notice it's there. You could have anybody from your, 12-year-old daughter to, your 80-year-old mother could shoot it if they had to.
And the gun here, this one's like the Romanian 9mm AKs. They're heavier. This one's pretty light, but still has pretty light recoil. And the Evo 3, the Scorpion, I really like it. But because of its really massive bolt, it does have a bit of that teeter-totter feel to it. Nothing bad.
Chunka a little bit?
A little bit of, I don't even want to say it's felt recoil, but something.
You just kind of feel the movement of it.
Yeah.
You feel the movement of the reciprocating mass more than you feel the charge of the ammunition itself.
Yeah, and whereas this one, it's got a massive enough bolt, but it's not bad. Not bad at all.
Well, and that reciprocating mass and felt recoil, pistol caliber carbines are kind of a bigger engineering challenge than people give them credit for, I think.
Absolutely, especially like AR-based ones.
Right, and because you've got so much variability in ammunition power, just from one round to the next, when it comes to 9mm, 45. I mean, the reason you don't see that much of it in 45 is because, well, it's a lot of variation in power, and so much of the feed reliability is going to rely on the speed of the bolt travel, and if there isn't sufficient blowback in a blowback system, then you're going to get misfeeds, and so many of it hasn't been as simple as sticking a new barrel and barrel adapter on it and machining a new mag well. All of these pistol caliber carbines are engineered from the CAD level up.
Yeah,
because all of those feed ramp
have
angles and everything has to be able to account for the lower force that you're dealing with in pistol calibers.
Well, the thing is, it is lower, but it's also higher because on a rifle, a centerfire rifle, you have a gas system.
Right.
Whereas on a pistol caliber, it's direct blowback. So you actually have more force directly banging the action than you would with a gas system. Plus, the gas system can be regulated. This is just coming back, so much is on your recoil mechanism. In the AR, it'd be your buffer and spring and all that. In an AK here, it's here. And so much stress gets put in the rear. That's why the Romanian guns have that synthetic buffer in them.
Well, and the popularity of these things is so much that a lot of the new kids in town, so to speak, are really getting into PCC development. Wilson Combat has gotten into the PCC thing a good long time ago. Actually, they were.
Oh yeah, the AR9. Yeah.
They were pretty well ahead of the pack on coming up with that stuff, and a lot of the reluctance has been the R&D that goes into making it actually work reliably. It seems like it should be easier than it really is.
Yeah, there are a lot of hidden engineering challenges. For example, in the 80s, Colt had to start using stainless steel fire control group pins, especially hammer pins, because of just the added felt recoil against all the parts, and the bolt catch on an AR pattern really takes a hammering. And that is something that the MPX does help with, and that's why it being a piston gun, even though you don't technically need a gas system to operate a 9mm, having it does soften the action and puts far less stress on the parts and makes more adjustable for suppressor shooting too. But no, I really like this KR9. Had it for years. This is the kind of pre-release, and it works fine. And interestingly, while militaries kind of shied away from submachine guns, kind of going to full caliber carbines like the CAR-15 or the AKSU in the 80s, there is a certain shift back 2 submachine guns for certain military applications, i.e. that Scorpion Evo 3 is a good example. But you are starting to see some 9mm creep back in for certain situations. That APC, that SCW we talked about last year. So they're starting to kind of, and that's always nice, because then you know you've got a truly field-tested gun.
And one of the selling points that you hear to the PCCs a lot when it comes to like home defense and that kind of thing is penetration.
Yep, I was going to mention that, especially if you live in more of an urban area or in an apartment. You have to be considerate of your neighbors, just as you would want them. You wouldn't want your neighbor firing a 30-06 next door if you were in an apartment.
Well, I wouldn't really want my neighbor firing a 9mm either, but yes, it's very considerate not to blow your neighbors away if you have to defend your house.
Yes,
it's very considerate.
Or even just, but yeah, 9mm, perfectly good at room distances. Sometimes even better than a rifle, because all that energy can just hit a target and stop versus punching a hole and going on through. You know, the whole knockdown argument.
There's a certain cadre of folks out there in the gun world that every time something new is developed, they ask. I've seen this question asked time and time and time again. When are you going to do it in 10mm? The 10mm fans seem to. The world just kind of revolves around them.
You know, pistols.
When are you going to give me a 10mm PCC?
Now, talking about PCC, yeah, I can see a purpose for a 10mm carbine. They are, I mean, that really does take advantage of that cartridge.
That may actually be a more reasonable, form, but like that may actually be a format that's more conducive to the 10mm cartridge than pistols. I
think so, yeah, because if you offer me a 4.5-inch, 5-inch barrel 10mm, I mean, I get that it has certain advantages, but it has some disadvantages. You move it over to a carbine with a 8-inch or 10-inch barrel, or 16 if you need to. Boy, you're going to really take full advantage of that cartridge. Yeah. And those are a lot of fun. They really are. But they are a very niche purpose, and the ammo is a lot more pricey than 9mm. You wouldn't think that 1 extra millimeter would add so much, but it does.
Well, it's supply and demand. Very little supply, and the only people demanding the 10mm are the 10mm loyalists.
But you know what? It's going to outlive 40, so that's all that we should care about.
Well, that is that.
The silver lining. Okay.
Okay. Chris also wanted to know, how does a blind guy see more than someone with 2015 vision?
You know what's funny? When my speech first read that, it read it like 2015, not, but like the year.
Like 2015?
I'm like, what happened in 2015?
Did everybody suffer some kind of myopia in 2015?
And, thinking back, that seems like that was one of the last normal years.
Yeah, actually, things haven't been normal for a while.
No, so. I mean, 2020, 2021 was kind of like, but it's been building up. No, I appreciate that, but there's a lot of things I don't see. Finish is really difficult for me, but yeah, feeling something obviously gives a very different set of data than looking at something. And I think it's just being studious, really examining from one end to the other. Sometimes I'll just sit outside on the porch swing and just frankly fondle a gun. But in doing so, I'll learn little things like a manufacturing technique or an angle cut. Even with guns I've had for years, sometimes decades, just, kind of going over. I like to know what I own intimately. I think it dates back to the days when I didn't have any money at all. So when I bought a gun, it was like end of the semester, I've been saving up.
Fondle it and pet it and name it George and.
What's that?
The
dog. Yeah.
There was almost just about any time I'd come to visit at some point, just kind of be cuddling one.
Yeah, and that was just
This is new. I love it.
Yeah, and that's just. It's nice to hold, but it's also just big. And I take what I do, sir. I don't own a gun that I don't try to know as much about as I can. But it's not an obligation. I enjoy that.
Yeah.
I love, like when this gun came in, I looked up as much as I could on the Vitiaz and the Sega 9 that was available back then, and it was a fun day. I love that new stuff.
I have several fond memories of going into different gun shops with you, and you just kind of by feel between the muzzle, whatever sensory data it is that sticks in your head like that. Most people don't even have that good of a memory for historical detail as it is. But the number of times I've seen you walk in and pick something up off the shelf and give it a once over and have an idea of which armory or which country was making those guns at the time, about how many of them were produced, some of the historical information about what conflicts they may have been involved in. You tended to know more just by handling a gun than the shop owner had any clue about.
Well, and again, that was my draw for guns, was their history. And I grew up in a time before computers were readily available. I did get a laptop in like 91, the first time, but I grew up in a time when I really had to do rote memorization. I couldn't just refer to my notes in school. So I just kind of grew up training my brain to remember things as best I could. But at the same time, I do fully recognize that my shortcomings are I can't see markings, especially people ask about fonts and things. And one reason I've avoided German guns, especially like snipers and stuff, so much goes into faking them, and you have to be able to tell by the fonts. So I also recognize where I can't now. I try not to speak to something that I know I don't know, if that makes sense.
Oh, sure.
And, markings are one of those. Finish. Now, one thing that I actually do detect pretty easily is rebluing. A reblued gun, the surface, and that's something we'll get to later in another question too with the sporters. I can key on what feels like reblue because they sandblast it and they round it. It feels so gross to me because it feels almost like a fake gun at that point. Because a real gun has kind of sharp edges, even to the markings. You can feel it. I can't, like on this, I don't know what it says, but I can feel markings and divots and stuff. And on a real finish, those are quite sharp.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it just sort of feels a little
off. And the same thing with sanded wood. A lot of people have handed me guns and, it's great, well, the wood's been sanded. How can you tell? It doesn't feel right. And that's just experience. That's not anything other than just handling a bunch of wood.
Have you handled a bunch of wood in your day? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I have. Thanks, Chris.
Everybody's got to have a hobby.
We appreciate the questions, Chris, and yeah. So with that, we'll move on to the written questions from the Patreon post on the Patreon page, which is a good thing to put Patreon things on.
And I have those pulled up right here, right. So we'll be right back.
Alrighty.
Okay, on to the Patreon questions. Cody W. asks, Misha, are you personally interested in things like ballistics and performance of historical cartridge? Things such as 30-06 versus 8x57 Mausers in World War I, or if 65x50 Japanese is a good intermediate cartridge. Mm-hmm. What do you like in historical cartridges? What do you think was when they really hit the sweet spot?
And that's why I grabbed this one. This is a 7mm Mauser, 1895. Obviously, I'm more interested in the historical aspects than strictly target shooting, but this is a good example of what was happening in the 1890s. The Craig, the 3040 Craig versus the 93 in 7mm is pretty famous from the Spanish-American War. Also, the British firing 303 versus this version in 7mm is quite famous for the Second Boer War. And I do think it's interesting because the performance of these Mauser cartridges, especially 7mm here, really did kind of lead to, lots of guns being adopted. The 1903 Springfield, the P14, and of course that would lead to the M1917 in the USA. Yeah, I do love the historical aspects and also pushing technology forward. I mean, Mauser did a great job of developing the recessed rim or rimless cartridge, not to mention just a long flat shooting. And then of course Germany pushed from the round nose to the Spitzer bullet. Well, France did in Germany. I like it from a historical point of view. And I would say, this 7mm here, it's really the reason I picked this gun up off a friend. I just thought it'd be neat to have a long rifle and 7mm, and kind of ditto for 6.5 Swede.
6.5, yeah.
I love Swedes. And it's not a 6.5 Swede is not an intermediate cartridge. When you fire, it's full power. It just happens to be a relatively skinny but long projectile coming out.
There's still a lot of ass behind it. Yeah. Okay. So you're going with the. I mean, one of the nice things about 6.5 is you can still get it.
Yeah, and 7mm too. I bought some new boxes.
Now that being said, I wonder what the most commonly reloaded cartridge is. When it comes to rounds they've got really robust casings, they're sometimes hard enough to find or crazy expensive. I wonder if those historical rounds, which one the reloaders tend to like the most.
On the other hand, I bet most of them are probably for pretty like 300 Win Mag. I bet gets reloaded because a lot of your target shooters and professional shooters reload their own ammo. So
sure.
Probably would end up being that.
You have to, just because you spend so much time on the range practicing that if you weren't shooting remand ammo,
and those guys are
ammo,
so good at what they do, they're better than a factory. A factory lets a ringer slip through now and again, even a good factory.
Yeah.
Those reloaders, because each bullet matters to them, they're doing it craftsmanship.
Oh yeah, and if you're using like a star loader press or something like that, if anything's wrong with it, you're going to know immediately. It's not really subject to a QC check that somehow gets by things and a bad batch goes out. It is custom ammunition.
But yeah, he had asked about
people in the competition world have really specific, they have really specific
needs,
loads that they like.
And each load is very specific. Are you winning a tournament? Are you hunting? Because hunters can also be that. Each load is different. And he also mentioned 6.5 Arasaka 6.5 by 50. That's a little bit older of a round because that's a unique semi-rim round because it was developed in the mid 1890s. So it was an early. So it was originally a round nose bullet. It does have a little less oomph, but it's still very much a full power round. And in World War II, it was really good at, honestly, taking down soft targets. We both know what that means. But armor penetration was...
The squishy bits, the wet wear.
Armor was virtually non-existent. It just didn't have any oomph. There's a reason the Japanese went to 7.7 mil. Part of it was going to a true recessed rimmed. Part of it was just they needed ability to penetrate thick clothing or light armor, what have you.
Yeah.
No, the 6.5, but the 6.5 has always been really hard to get, inexpensive. So I think more Swede, and 6.5 Carcano is fun.
Okay. Moose wants to know this is kind of a bug out bag question. And if you only had one, your house is burning down and you only have time to grab one rifle. An FMAK 4721 or a SAM7 SF. Which one do you grab and why?
I think he's the one that always asks about those two every Q&A.
Oh, does he?
I don't know. I had to go back and I think
Moose.
Yeah.
Well, I can remember that it was Moose next time
I'm going
around.
to cheat, of course, and say this because it's the one I own, because I don't actually own an FM 4721 because it's not a military configuration. And of course, the SAM7 SF is a great gun, but they're out there. It could be replaced. These are not super rare, but the FM RPK 47 is one thing Russian, so this would be my pick. So I'm cheating a wee bit there, but I'm going with it.
Yeah,
it's the benefit of doing your own thing. But yeah, this is the same as what he asked about. It just has the longer barrel and bipod.
Follow-up question to that then. Since this was a house is burning down, you can only grab one gun, but he gave you sort of a limited set of parameters there. Is that even the size of rifle you would take? If it's like, I have to grab one, I'm bugging out, the apocalypse is here, whatever, your house is on fire.
If it's the house is on fire, my honest to God answer would be that shotgun from Bob. because yeah, that family heirlooms can't be replaced, which is ironic because, you know, materialistically speaking, it's probably my least valuable gun. But, you know, everything else can more or less be replaced. If it's a bug out thing where a gun actually has to be used,
Sure.
you know, a A223 would be. It's really hard not to say an AR because parts are available, mags are available, ammo's available, and
Right.
we've had this discussion before. 223 is a good all-around cartridge. Same goes for 7.62x39. You know, those two cartridges are true intermediate cartridges that can do a lot of stuff. And parts are available for your basic AK. I'd love to pick a Swiss gun, but mags would be, you know, make sure you grab enough mags because that's what you're going to get.
Because that's all you're going to have.
And
yeah.
I'm not worried about them breaking parts, but if somehow they did, good luck. Yeah. So yeah, house burning down, sentimental gun, bug out thing, you know, probably just a well-rounded intermediate gun. Plus the AR does have the advantage of being lightweight, which if you're having to trek somewhere is
It has the advantage of being lightweight, unless you're just kind of one of those guys that likes to hang about 4 pounds of shit off your rails. And
luckily that stuff can get stripped off, and always does. Anyone who's ever done classes when those guns come in, they
by the time they've been lugging it around all day, it's like, no, we don't really need this on the range. We don't need this.
A lot of experienced owners of those types of classes will kind of keep a bag around for builders to toss that crap in, because if you need it, you can always put it back on, but you don't need it most of the time.
Right.
And I sure as hell don't need all that.
But it's cool. Look how cool it looks.
It's fine. I've got a lot of guns that I like because they're cool, but they're not super practical.
No. And that actually kind of ties into another question we have further down the road. Tim Bone says, happy holidays, guys. What do you think is the hands-down best muzzle device for the AK platform? That's a broad question.
Yeah, I'd say whatever
Where do you start?
Yeah, whatever you're... I don't like the big, you know, screw-off ones that are just like super-duper evil-looking muzzle. For one thing, they tend to catch on things.
Of like the glass breakers and...
Yeah, all that crap. Yeah. And another thing, they tend to be just obnoxiously loud and recoily, so not those. If you're talking literally a muzzle brake, not a flash hider, really the AK-74 style or some derivative of it works great, works fine. If you want a flash hider, like one on this RPK here, they work well at being a flash hider, and they're very small. And yeah, they're very small and light. I don't like big muzzle devices if I can help it, especially heavy ones.
I mean, this one's really barely any diameter-wise much bigger than the barrel.
Yep, but it doesn't need to be bigger.
Very low profile.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be bigger. And then they made it for this barrel because it's already a big, long barrel, so there's not a ton of flash coming out anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I tend to swerve more military, so I don't have a lot of experience with the commercial devices, but I find a lot of them to be kind of overdone, overblown, if you will.
Sure.
But I really hate the big concussion-y ones. Oh, they drive me.
But fireballs are neat.
If you say so.
Okay. Michael Montz wants to know, the Springfield SA-35 just dropped. What do we know now as some months will have passed? The MSRP seems kind of low for USA forged and machined steel pistol. And now I see that FN USA has begun HP production in South Carolina as well for double the price.
Yeah, so I have thoughts on that. The Springfield is assembled in the USA. That's not to say their parts are all from the USA, or even if the parts are machined here, the components are. Historically, they've sourced parts from Brazil and other overseas places. So I suspect to keep the cost reasonable, they're either importing complete frames or they're bringing over forgings that they can complete out here, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Sure, whatever. High powers. I brought out one here to make a point. This is my Argentinian high power. They're neat guns. They're also very distinctly 1920s, 1930s technology. Single action only. relatively primitive sights. 13 round mag. Yeah, sure. It was the first to do this high capacity. But yeah, good ergonomics, but not, yeah. And of course they weigh several ounces because they're all metal. Now I know the newer ones, especially the SA35, they've updated the sights a bit. I know they have 15 round mags. They are still an all steel pistol. They are still $600-700, single action only. Are they cool? I'm sure, but there's a lot of surplus high powers out there, be they FN or Inglis or Argentine or the Bulgarian copies or the FEG copies. I don't know how much of a market there really is. I mean, good on them for trying, but there's a ton of surplus guns, and I do know that the original high power prices have gone up, at least the FN guns. But it wasn't long ago, just a couple of years ago, we were getting nice surplus guns for $300-400. So, and it is still old school tech. I just don't know.
It seems like a strange thing to have hit the market at a high price point.
Well, and again, like you said, the Springfield's lower. The FN is, more. So I just, compared to a modern Beretta, a modern Glock, a modern SIG, a modern CZ, at least an older gun, be it one of the Nazi-produced FNs or the Inglis or even this Argentine, there's a certain military history or police history or authenticity. I think what you're going to see a lot of times when old guns get introduced as new, they end up getting compared, rightfully so, to the originals, and usually they fall short. But we'll see. Springfield does have a good track record.
Colt Python.
Which they finally kind of have worked out a little bit. But yeah, it's just like, I don't know, I have a feeling a lot of people, instead of buying the new one, it's just going to get people looking for the old ones more, probably driving up the price on those. But there's a ton of old high powers in this here country.
Maybe it's a little bit of bias on my part, but I've always just sort of thought of the high power as like the Yugo of 1911s. I mean, I understand. It's different. You got the single action going on. It ergonomically, like running the gun, it feels like a low-red 1911 to me, but that's just a personal preference thing. I know they're incredibly popular guns.
Being initially developed by Browning and then later by Siva at FN, it was going to be very much like the 1911, and it does have some improvements. I think that the takedown is easier on it.
That's true.
The extractor, now of course originally it had an internal extractor, later external. That's an improvement. But yeah, it's still single action only. 13 rounds is better than 7 or 8, but I don't know. It's kind of like when the Luger was brought back in the 70s. It's nice to see the historical guns, but will they ever really hold a candle to the original? If not in terms of quality of production, just in terms of mystique.
Sure.
But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm sure it's not a dog, but I've got enough originals, and I paid less for them than what one of these are going to cost now. So
it just really kind of surprises me to hear that there's been a big spike in high power prices and production.
Well, FN announced just a couple of years ago they were finally ceasing manufacture, and of course, once something is no longer available, that's when people want it.
Mr. Montz had a follow-up question as well. As a Colt dealer, do you know what's going on there? I thought all AR-15 lowers were being marked carbine now, yet we've seen some 2021 OEMs marked M4 carbine with a CR prefix, as well as 2021 AR-15A4 marked 20-inch rifles with a CAR prefix. What's up with the?
I don't think even
markings question.
I don't think even Colt knows what's going on. I will say this: all the ones we've had in that are truly new production have had CR on them for the last like 6 years. So that's not something new. There was a big swath of time where they still had M4 marking and CR. All the new A4s we've had in were all marked CR with the serial too. The original A4s were marked CAR and then the serial. If new ones are coming out, they're not just like new old stock. I have a feeling they're just using up stock at the factory. I don't know. But all the ones we've had come in here straight from them were all CR marked and had carbine on them. But it's Colt. Nothing surprises me. But I haven't heard anything like, oh yeah, they're going back to the M4. But then again, I haven't really been paying close attention.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
We have another two-parter, and this gentleman would like his name redacted, so redacted. What is the most service-tested current U.S. import AK? As in, like, you know, maybe the Yugos have been the most tested because of the conflict in the Balkans. Maybe KUSAs are the most tested because they're Russian-owned and probably based on AK-103 blueprints.
They're not Russian-owned, just to be clear.
Okay.
For legal things, yeah, because they are American, because of the whole sanctions. But they are making dead ringers for what's in Russia, like that KR9 earlier. So, yeah, anyway. I'm not going to say them because they are still... KUSA is making for the civilian market. They're making a nice gun, but it's for the civilian market. Their guns have not really been product tested. Just because they're based on a gun that has... I can't say that carries over for combat.
That's fair. I mean,
the Yugo stuff is good, but the Zastava factory was essentially bombed into virtual non-existence during the Yugoslav wars in the 90s, and they've done an excellent job of rebuilding, and I think they make very good guns for what they are for a price point. Arsenal has produced a lot of guns, and their machine receivers are second to none, but Wasser, I know it's boring. One neat thing about the Wasser, the other guns are semi-automatic versions of guns that have gone to combat. So they use a semi-automatic trigger group. For those that remember, years ago, there was a batch of Wassers that were sold to contractors, guards, what have you, third parties in Iraq. Literally, Wassers have been carried and most likely used sometimes in a real combat zone, and of all places, Iraq. Plus, the factory, Romanian factory, has been building them since the early 60s. They haven't changed it. For better or worse, it's kind of the same pattern they've always had. It's not the prettiest, it's not the most refined or aesthetically pleasing, but damn, I mean, since Segas and all that are banned now and the Chinese guns are banned, the Romanian guns just have that humble but very consistent pedigree. Plus they've passed several 5 and even 10,000, even 20,000 round tests. And you have to remember the Battlefield Las Vegas credits to them for going how long. So all in all, it's a boring answer, but... And also, I'd say this gun has been in the country the longest. The Romanian guns, under various names, have been coming in since 1997. So 25 years of coming in. Pretty much the longest live one.
I'm trying to remember from a timeline basis when the revolution in Romania was, but.
Well, they kicked their dictator out in '89, but
yeah, late '80s, early '90s.
But the factory still kept on going, and yeah, there's been turnover and things, but they pretty much do stuff. I don't know. It just seems like that. Yeah, I know arsenals have been coming in slightly longer, but especially early on, and even today, they come in smaller numbers. There are so many Romanian AKs in this country, just by virtue of that. Plus, Romania was a big exporter of select fire guns during the Comblock era.
Do you think that Polish AKs and Yugos will eventually lose some legitimacy as good rifles, or even stop production in the years to come as these countries' militaries move away from the AKs?
I think their legitimacy as good rifles will continue. Again, I cite the Chinese guns. They haven't been imported in coming up on 3 decades now, and they still have a good reputation. So I think their reputation is secure. Do I think they'll cease production? Yes, because especially for military use, militaries eventually move on. That's the way of things. The AK was developed way back when. Now, will they stop production at like WBP or even Zastava for the commercial market? They'll keep making them as long as the money's there. But as far as military use, they'll sooner or later move on.
Well, it sounds like, I don't know if this is correct or not, the person that submitted the question was saying that the Polish military is planning to move to the MSBS GROT.
Yeah, they are. They're starting the transition. It was a long time in coming.
And the Serbians are going over to the Zastava M19.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what exactly Serbia is doing because they really just went with the M21, but Zastava has had a lot of, there's been a lot of guns, and of course different, you can have one gun for your main infantry, one gun for your border guards, one gun for your special, so it may be one of those kind of hybrid situations. The Baril, it was adopted in 96, but they have roughly 80,000, or at least they did, so it's going to be a little while before they produce enough GROTs to replace that many guns. Plus, some of the Barils are quite new, just a few years old. Yeah. So I have a suspicion that in Poland, the Baril will at least kick about for second line, more just bog standard use for years to come. It's sufficient, but as I've said in other videos, the Baril is really kind of pushing the AK as far as it can go and still be an AK.
Sure.
Change anything more and it's not anymore. But, time moves on.
Okay, well, speaking of life moves on, let's move on to a series of questions actually from G Bobby. Have you ever come across a milsurp gun that was bubbaed up beyond repair? And have you had any success selling bubbaed up guns?
So I brought out a couple here. One may not look bubbaed at first. One definitely should, and if this doesn't look bubbaed,
it's so shiny.
You haven't spent enough time around milsurp. Now, this one's the long and the short, just to cut to it. If you want to buy a bubbaed gun, fine. Buy it as a gun, a shooter. Do not buy it as a restoration project because it won't work. Let's just say it, I'm just pulling numbers out of my rear here. Let's say you find the bubbaed gun for $100. Great deal. You see Arisaka's normal guns going for $500. You think, I'll save a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Well, you need a stock. How much can that be? Well, to get the right stock, because there are several variants, maybe the right one in decent shape is $100. Okay, $200. Then you realize you need front barrel band, middle barrel band, and then screws for them. Okay? Then you realize, that stock didn't come with the butt plate. Okay? My point is, you end up spending almost as much just on the parts to put it back together. And
the time to find the specific parts. Or to find, a parts gun, essentially.
Yep.
That's going to have what you need, in which case you might as well just use that new gun.
And like on this one, what do you do about the bolt? It's bent down. You can't really straighten it. If you get another bolt, it's not going to match, and it may not head space. So do you leave it as straight? And then you do all that, and then you realize there's another weird thing. Like on this one, the rear sight has been bobbed. It used to be a peep. It's been made into a notch. And then you realize the front sight, they took the ears off. Do you try to fix those? I mean, this one, you could try to find a front sight block. My point is, when you get into these sporter guns, you notice more and more little things they did. And it ends up just not being worth it. So if you're going to buy one, it's fine. Buy it as a shooter. But don't buy it as a restorer. Another option, like you said, parts guns, they're guns like these are often a source of great parts because original parts are really expensive for old milsurp guns. So yeah.
Well, and people that have done those custom mods, They may do it with the awareness that it kind of kills the resale value from an authenticity standpoint. Maybe they'd never really intend to sell it to begin with. And, you know, if you're going to bubba up your gun, expect it to lose a substantial amount of value.
Well, and a lot of like these Japanese guns, they were free. Maybe dad brought it back from the war or grandpa.
Sure.
Yeah, or at most you bought it at a garage sale for $5. Now some of the nicer converted ones, not this one, were actually gunsmith projects that people did to basically earn their gunsmith degree. You know,
Yeah,
kind
okay.
of a master's thesis. And so some sporter guns are really gorgeous for what they are. This one I brought out because this seems like a great gun. It has intact mum, it's matching, and it's from a very rare arsenal.
Furniture looks original.
It's not glossy, it's not been this seems like it's a great gun. But, let me cock my bolt back all the way. It's a little stiff. It's very dry. Here's a cleaning rod. Cleaning rod is not sticking out. Cling ding. Someone a long time ago, for some unknown reason, put a blob of weld in the barrel. They didn't drill holes in it, they didn't fully demill it. They just like a little welder in there.
Why?
I don't know. I really, really don't know. I think someone just maybe wanted to make it a display gun. Why they didn't just remove the firing pin and dink. So sometimes with these old guns, you think you've got yourself a great gun, and then there's an internal thing, and that's kind of the point with any of this old stuff. It has an unknown history. So anytime you buy milsurp, even what looks good and original, sometimes you get in there and realize that not so good and not so original. That's just kind of the nature of the game. It was nearby this one, and I thought it was kind of a funny story.
Well, and you would hope that if people are going to kind of do their own custom work in their own garage, you'd hope they would do it with kind of cheap low-end guns. Have you ever run into a situation where somebody took something that was incredibly valuable and did something stupid to it?
Yes.
Yeah?
I remember one guy gave one of those wonderful spray paint jobs to an HK91. Not the rarest thing in the world.
Sure.
Not the most common. They sell for like $4 or $5K now. So
Right.
Yeah, he spray painted it. And you'll never get that all off. So yeah, and I've seen a lot of old military guns that were really rare, like a G3340. But usually those got sporterized because people didn't know how rare they are. I saw a sporterized Japanese Type 2 paratrooper once, and that was funky. The Type 2 is the takedown that splits in two. The front half was basically just a barrel. I don't know. Anywho.
Okay, so I guess the moral of the story is, if you're going to bubba up your gun, do it cheap and don't expect to get your money back
And
out
thank
of it.
God with the internet now, you can at least Google your gun first.
Yeah.
Oh, one of the coolest ones I saw back when Mosins were cheap. A guy was making, I think they were M44s mostly, into lamps. He was like running a electrical cord up the barrel.
Okay.
That was pretty cool.
That's pretty novel.
That was back when they were like 3 for $100. So
Yeah.
and some of them were pretty ragged out they were like the Chinese. Yeah, okay, fine. They were already kind of toast, but they looked really cool as lamps.
Practically made out of a 2x4.
Can you imagine showing the ATF that? They come in to do the, where's the guy? And you just point to a lamp. There.
It's like, well, there's that one. It's technically a gun.
Yep, it's still a gun. Once a gun, always a gun, but it's a lamp. Okay, what's his next question?
He wanted to know if you've ever been to SHOT Show, like if you do any of the big trade shows, conventions.
Nah, I'm not big on groups. I like meeting people, but I'm more of a one-on-one person. Auditorily, when you get into a big room with all the voices and echo, it overwhelms me, kind of sensory. And plus, trying to navigate those areas with a cane or even a guide dog, it's difficult for me and not super safe to have a long cane sticking out between people's legs.
Sure, it's
It's not ideal.
Big crowds, kind of chaotic layout, and I mean when you mentioned kind of the walla walla, like the background of just mumbling of people talking. It's loud in a convention space.
And a lot of that stuff
you practically got to yell in a conversation.
And a lot of that, it's visual. Looking at things on monitors or looking at guns that you can't necessarily put your fingers on. I've been invited several times, but yeah, not my thing. And I'm fine with that. Plus, everyone I talked to, sales reps, manufacturers, everyone who went, they came back sick. I'm not saying it was it. I'm just saying they had some kind of cold, some kind of flu, and this is by their like I feel like crap. So, in fact, my rep for Arsenal, who is always really good about communication, sometimes a little too good, I couldn't get a hold of him because I placed a pretty good order, like 30 some odd guns at SHOT Show with him, and I was trying to confirm the order, and I didn't hear from him for almost a full week. And I told my wife, I said, something's gone wrong. So this isn't, and sure enough, he called me that Friday afterwards, already
with the cocoa.
I don't know if he had that. He just said, and I could hear it in his voice. He did not sound healthy, but and this was a week after, so either he had the flu or the goof.
Flu.
Yeah, whatever. He had something that I didn't want.
Right.
I don't care. That's the whole deal with what's going on. I don't want to get sick from anything. So
sure.
Super glad I didn't go this year for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that I've talked to spent a good chunk of January feeling sick. Between travel and large events and people seeing and some of it may have just been straight up fatigue.
Absolutely.
I think I can't count how many people I've talked to that couldn't wait for like just December to be over, holidays to be over, get through the new year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I like this question. Do you own any guns that you hate shooting but still enjoy owning? And
yes. Yeah. I was about to say I spoke too soon a minute ago when I was saying he had been very
absent from the picture.
Yes. Couldn't last forever. Here's a great example. May not be the only one or the best one, but my M14/M1A. This is actually a M14 marked gun because it's not a Springfield, but same thing goes. I love having one of these guns. They look awesome. Key part of American history, kind of bookends the whole M1 Grand saga. Who doesn't love the M1, all that stuff? Early Vietnam influences, all kinds of cool things. They're very fun to get the right stock for and accessorize by putting a dummy selector or stop in this case, handguard, getting the right flash hider on, building it from an original part. A lot of fun in building. Very, very, very little interest in actually shooting.
Why is that?
I'm not super keen on the kind of traditional stock with the recoil impulse. Also not really keen having your hand near this slidey thing. I've never bit myself, but always kind of seemed like a possibility. But truth be told, I just have other guns in this caliber, 7.62 NATO, 308, that I enjoy more. The FAL, the G3 SEPMI, and if I want this style, as anyone who's followed the channel knows, I love the Italian Beretta BM59. To me, the BM59 does everything the M14 does, but better. It's got a nicer feeling recoil impulse, attached by, I don't know. It's just, if I want to shoot a gun in this style, in this caliber, I always pull the BM59 out. I wouldn't sell this, but it's just not one I like shooting.
Ergonomically, it's very chunky.
It is, and it's also strangely light, which means you do feel the oomph more than you might with something else.
Sure. You own a few guns that you enjoy shooting and owning that I can't stand. And my dad has tried to convince me.
He's talking about HKs, guys. He hates HKs. Get him. He hates HKs.
No. My dad has tried to convince me. You've tried to convince me about how great Makarovs are. I can't stand them.
I remember the time when me and your dad, because I owned them before meeting your dad. I think when we first realized we both owned, that's when you kind of got cut out of everything.
Right. It's like, okay, well, the Makarov people have found each other, so now I'm not my father's son anymore.
You just kind of
wandered. I lost a friend to my dad. And
you just kind of wandered away at that point.
I did. I was like, nope, I'm out.
Yep. I remember it in the garage there. Yep, that day.
And you've had a few other cool things in the collection that. I don't know that either of us miss really, but
yeah, there's several guns that I owned and just eventually sold.
It's like, yeah, please somebody buy this.
Remember that old Feather 9mm carbine with the retractable stock and the little lasers? That thing it never worked for crap.
No.
But it was during the ban, so it was just cool to have a retracting stock, but
I did not like your Benelli M1 at all.
I think you liked it in theory, but no, yeah.
I liked it in theory.
Yeah.
Now the M4.
Well made.
The Benelli M4 is awesome.
Yeah, and that, to be fair, I always wanted the M4, but that day when we went to that store, they had a new M4 for like $1,400, or they had a very lightly used, unfired Benelli M1 with mag tube extension and all that for like $700. So
that thing was a rough ride. It was not comfortable to shoot.
I was half the price, and the quality's there, but no, I always wanted an M4, and that's why I don't have an M1 now. After getting the M4, why? I mean, I get it. The M1 still has, the M2 M1 still has some things. It's lighter weight, but the M4 suits my needs more, and it is certainly more pleasant to shoot.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Shotguns are kind of a mixed bag anyway.
Yeah, that's very true. I guess I wonder if there's sort of an inverse to that. Do you have anything that you don't really bother to own, but you love to shoot?
The FN FS 2000, I kind of miss owning every so often, and then I'll go shoot
that weird kind of oversized bullpup.
The tactical tuna, the boat. I lament not owning one from time to time, and then I'll go shoot a friend's, and then I'm good for another few years.
It's like, oh yeah, that's why I don't own it.
It wasn't a horrible bullpup for 2001, although I would argue still the AUG was better even then. But
sure.
With newer bullpups, the Tavor, amongst many others, it's been outstripped by time.
Okay, moving on to G. Bobby's last question. Pioneer Arms has announced they're going to be making some of their new rifles with forged trunnions. Do you think they're worth giving a second chance?
Yes, I do. The problem is they've already been given a second chance.
This is not the second chance you're talking about.
No, just having an example of what Pioneer Arms could have been. But when they first came into the country, they're AK Sporters. They were under the IO import label, as was FB Ratum. And they had some issues, but they came back around, I guess it was about 2015, under their own name, PAC USA. And they said, look, we had some problems, we know that, we've fixed them, but we're flying straight. Give us a chance. And that was their second chance. They sent out demo guns to me, and then I sent one with their permission, because I asked, to AK Operators Union. You can look historically how that turned out. It wasn't good. That was their second chance. So now, and it wasn't just the gun. I could have forgiven the gun having issues, kind of like you're talking about FM having some early issues with their pre-releases. But they did it the right way. They acknowledged them and they fixed them.
Sure. And ultimately, it wasn't so much. It certainly wasn't anything design-wise.
No.
It was somebody that they were
sourcing
some parts
Pioneer
from.
didn't have a design issue. They had a QC and quality of the parts issue. But instead of saying, thanks for telling us, we'll fix it, they started blaming everyone but themselves. Primarily Rob, a little bit me. But
well, and I mean, the one problem that FM had was sort of pre-release during marketing and it's sort of the sneak preview batch of things that they sent out to people. Some people had a just glowing success, and some people ran into an issue that essentially involved breaking the gun in a little bit.
Right, overly thick coatings here, a little bit of an over dimension there, little tweaks that could have been done, no problem. But they handled it properly.
Oh yeah.
As has PSA, Palmetto State, when they've had issues. Pioneer blame shifted into that. I don't trust them. If they say they're using a forged trunnion, I would want to see some proof. They don't have a lot of credibility with me. And I brought out this WBP, the recent jack here, because this could have been Pioneer. They were in the country before WBP. And when WBP first came around as kits and then guns, people didn't know what to think. They didn't have a name for themselves. But through a good partnership and just, you know, making a good gun, they are now standing on their own terms, with their own name. So when they said they switched from a cast front trunnion to a forged, I believe them, and we've not had any issues with the trunnions on these either. Plus, they never played the game with the Radom name. WBP has always been very proud to say they're WBP. Pioneer has kind of played the game with the name Radom. Yeah, their factory is in the city of Radom, Poland, but they tend to really talk about being in Radom, not saying that they're FB, but if people were to draw that conclusion, they would not be quick to
correct them.
Yeah,
sure.
It's like,
yeah, go ahead and draw those assumptions.
Yeah, and if someone calls them out, oh, we never said we were. We are. They're playing a little bit coy with that. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's just, it's not. It shows you that type of marketing. Well,
and you know, gun owners have pretty long memories about this kind of thing, and getting burnt on something really does leave a lasting impression that's very difficult for that manufacturer to overcome.
Yeah.
And if this were a second chance, as you said, yes, absolutely, they should have a second chance.
Everyone,
but
yeah.
Third, fourth, fifth chance starts to, it's like, why are you guys even here?
Yeah, no. So, and the final point, why? We already have lots of good AKs. We have Zastava. We have Century, still doing the Wassers. We have Arsenal. We have the real FB Radom with the Barils, and we've got WBP. And in the USA, we now have KUSA, and yes, we have Palmetto State, which, by the way, their new M16 looks pretty neat, the Vietnam replica that they're
cool.
doing. So so there are so many options from companies that I trust more. Sorry. You know, I've already bought that car, essentially. You know, it's too late. There's already too many other good
It was already 11 once.
I'm not going to, you know, maybe the new ones will be fine, but there have already been other companies that have earned my business, and many others.
They have a real uphill battle, I
Yep.
think. It's not an unwinnable one, but they've got a fair amount of making up to the market to do.
Yeah, competing with Zastava and a WBP for imports and competing with PSA for price point is going to be real hard to do.
Agreed.
I would definitely trust a PSA, and their guns are about the same money as the Pioneer. So.
Okay, user Nib had a few questions for you.
Yeah, a few. Well, I think you started off by saying just one question. So
yeah.
But hey, when we say ask as many questions, you know we're serious now.
Well,
So, yeah.
a few people took you up on that.
Yep, that's fine.
He wants to know why do Valmet 62 magazines have lanyard loops?
Yep, that's why he's got a couple of Valmet questions. So let's look at the mags here for a minute. Here is what he's talking about. Probably the metal mag has this tab. It's essentially a copy of a Russian or Polish with a really nice blued finish and a little tab just welded on the bottom. Why? Because Finland is snowy. And if you drop a mag in deep snow, it might not be the easiest thing to bend down and fish out, especially if you're wearing combat gear, winter gear, whatever. So if it's got a lanyard loop on it, you can jank it back out. And of course, if you don't need it, no harm, no foul. But it was there in case mags got dropped, and they were easy to pick up, especially in snow. Even though the later ones, this is one of the transitional green ones. The ones that came after were black, and they still kept the lanyard loop, although it's fixed now. So it's something that continues to this very day. Again, it doesn't cost anything extra, it doesn't hurt anything, and it's there just in case. You also see it, and I should have grabbed one, on the Romanian mags meant for training. Again, it's good to have things tethered to you for training purposes, especially if you're practicing, mag drills and whatnot, not to keep dropping them on the ground, losing them. If you want to tether to your gun or to your belt or otherwise. For some reason, a lot of military pistols have lanyard rings and lanyards that go on the belt. So yeah, dropping and recovering from deep snow.
Interesting. Were there any Valmet 71 rifles produced as folders?
Yes. The 71, now this was of course this is the 62 version, machined receiver, all that, 7.62x39. With the 71, they wanted something lighter weight and more cost effective to produce. So the 71 was a private venture at Valmet, and it was their first effort at a stamped receiver. It was their first time they branched out into other calibers. They did not only 7.62x39, but they also started doing 223, later 5.56 NATO renamed. They were basically a lot like the Russian AKM versus this style, with more AKM looking sights and stuff. And like the AKM, there was an underfolding stock version, not a side folding, but an underfolder in both 7.62 and presumably, I spoke too soon earlier. Thank you there, buddy. Done as an underfolder. Now, were any semi-autos imported? No. The M71 was not terribly successful here or abroad. It was a little too weak. The stamped receiver needed a little more attention. That's why the M76...
Speaking of needing attention.
That's why the M76 had extra welding and thicker metal. Anywho, so the 71 was only made for a few years. Both calibers fixed and folding, but the only ones that made it into the USA were the fixed stock 223 guns. Even the 7.62x39s didn't come over, much to my regret. I would love to have an M71S in that caliber. So yeah, underfolding stocks.
Okay. And he was wanting to know if anybody has done an accuracy test with a Valmet rifle with Lapua 7.62x39 ammo. And if not, he'd be willing to donate 200 rounds to the cause.
If he means here with us, no. If he means in history, I'm sure someone has in the past, because Lapua ammo was about the only commercially available 7.62x39 when the Valmet started coming in the late 60s, early 70s. Actually, that was kind of the problem. We don't think of it today, but 7.62x39 was a rare cartridge back then, and thus expensive. Before the thawing of the Cold War and the falling apart of the comm block, and Lapua ammo, while good, is even expensive today. So back then, it was, if you look at prices, even not adjusting for inflation, it's high. So that's actually why the original Valmets and 7.62x39, like this M62, did not sell very well. Yeah.
Well, are we going to take him up on that offer for 200 rounds, even though your accuracy, marksmanship testing abilities are
we're going to start working on the range out in the mountains, and I'm going to buy I'm going to get some custom-made steel targets. Sounds like a great way to have like an inaugural shoot if he wants to do it.
Oh, sure.
Valmet with good cartridge, but would like to do it when we actually have the range up and going this year sometime.
Yep. Yeah, we're working on building you're working on
I'm going to put you to work too.
Oh good. Yeah, those steel targets aren't gonna mount themselves, and
no,
that gravel's not gonna get spread all by itself. And
I've actually sourced the wood and some roofing material, nothing fancy, but some either shingles or sheet steel, and was talking with a guy who lives local who cuts steel targets that are IPSC approved and all that stuff. So nice. He had a catalog, and I thought that'd be cool to kind of pick out some. So yes, we'll take it, but that sounds like a good way to ring it in, quite literally.
Yeah. Okay, what's the real story with the SSG-82 rifles imported by Century in the 90s?
I want one. Now, I've passed them up once or twice, and I wish I had not. No, they're really cool. They're bolt actions in 5.45x39. They were primarily used and carried by the East German border guards monitoring the Berlin Wall. So they weren't just out there with like full Kalashnikovs. And also they wanted a gun that could be accurate. So if they needed to pick someone off, you know, they wouldn't miss and hit a civilian, because obviously it's in Berlin, a city. And if an East German guard killed an innocent, you can imagine the political. So there were several factors. They were good guns, but mostly the history behind them more than anything else. I would like to find one.
Actually, Nib asked, are they border guard guns? It seems as if they imported two different versions. Some barrels were hammer forged with the Steyr-like hammer marks, and some were smooth.
The marks actually aren't from hammer forging. That's a different process. I've seen hammer forged barrels with the marks and some not. For example, Romanian barrels are called hammer forged. That's actually just how fast you run it through the machine. So you really can't tell if a barrel is cold hammer forged by just looking at it externally. So probably what you're seeing are just two different production runs, and the ones with the visible marks are probably just made a little bit hastier or made on tooling that was starting to get a little dull. Mm-hmm. So as far as I know, they had the same barrel make. I mean, they should. Germany literally invented hammer forging in World War II. So if anyone was going to do it, it'd be them.
Let's see. Has anyone done a test with RWS 545x39 ammunition? And what rifle would you use to do this?
I really don't know. It's a little outside of my purview. It's kind of hard to get that kind of ammo anyway. As far as the rifle I would use, you know, your options are pretty limited. It probably would not be that FM RPK you saw earlier in the video, because it has that big honking bipod. Mm-hmm. I'd probably, let me think, you know, all things being equal, probably either a Sega SGL31 or an Arsenal SLR 104, 105, either of those. You know, full length, 16-inch barrels. You really don't need any more length than that in their, you know, quality cold hammer forged chrome line guns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed that particular question didn't volunteer to send us 200 rounds to test that out either.
And I'm not sure I'd use an SSG82. I've heard funny things about their accuracy, but I don't have any first-hand experience, so yeah, I don't know. They are a bit of an anomaly.
A kind of a follow-up to that, he wants to know if the 545x39 SiG SAN rifle is a possibility.
No, and that's something we asked Dave directly in May, and when we visited again at the end of November last year, asked him again. The deal is they're not tooled up to do it, so it would cost a lot, and the minimum order is 500. And now, if you have someone else to share that with, you know, internationally, that's fine, but it would cost way too much, and what would he do with 500 of those guns? The market is smaller than you think. But no one's really interested, SIG, them, and they'd have to go through all testing. You know, the SIG's not going to just slap a new barrel on an existing gun and call it good. If they're going to do it, it has to go through their full testing process, deep freeze chamber, accuracy, full auto fire. Even if it's a semi-auto, they insist that all their guns be full auto rated, if you were. So it's, for what it is, not worth it. They can't even produce enough 223 and 300 blackout and 7.62 NATO guns, so.
True.
Yeah, why split the market even more?
Have you handled a Bloom Besser-Treffen PE90P with the diopter tuning and the they claim, like, you know, trigger tuning and diopter tuning, and do you think they're worth the premium?
Why, yes, I have. And here it is. Dave had a few of these.
Like magic.
Yeah, ta-da! But yeah, I haven't really covered this too much in a video, because essentially it is just a PE90 551, but it's also not.
Ooh, ah.
For one thing, it does still come with a manual, plus kind of an extra thing, da-da-da. It does come with a sling default, standard hook type. Comes with a magazine loader. Comes with a modern 20-round mag. Kind of interesting. If I can get it on here. Maybe not. These are new. And there we go. They fit really tight for clips. and it comes with a typical belt kit. As far as the gun itself, the older ones had a slightly fancier bipod, and they had slightly fancier rear sights. The current generation, they do have this special kind of nickel style finish, which is pretty sharp. They also have a BLUM serial, and they've got a marking on them.
BLM?
BLUM, Bloom.
Oh.
Bloom. And mostly they're just hand fitted, like the upper to lower has no play. They essentially strip them all apart, but they are produced from SIG, especially for the Blum custom shop. They disassemble the sight, deburr it, tinker it, hand fit it all back together, then they serialize it. They do the same for the front sight, for what that's worth. Pretty standard barrel, 20.7 inches. It's not internally threaded. It does have a bayonet lug. And they do give it a different spring, and probably most importantly, they do take the trigger group apart, smooth it, and then serialize it together and put it back. So yeah, these aren't coming with the special rear sight and special bipod anymore, but they also reduced the price by $1,000. So, you know, win some, lose some.
Not insignificant.
Yeah, and these aren't, they are more than a standard PE90 551, but not hugely more. They're about $1,000 more, which when you're talking about this is about a 25% increase. For a custom shop gun. Not too shabby. They're certainly a collector type thing, but they do feel nice. There's absolutely no play. The sights are everything feels really stiff in a good way on these. It's not going to move. There's no play in the sight, so once you set it, it's going to stay where you leave it. And this recoil system definitely feels smoothed up. They deburr the inside of the receiver and all that good stuff. So yeah, I'm sure I'll do a full video on it, but I'm reasonably impressed. I've handled quite a few custom shop guns, and it kind of hangs in there with, it reminds me a lot in spirit of like a Smith & Wesson custom shop revolver. Just they take a more or less standard production gun, take it apart, deburr it, really clean it up, work over the trigger, work over the sights, put it back together, mark the price up a bit, and
sure,
call it good.
Can I take a look?
Sure. You break it, you bought it. Nah, they're pretty cool. And it's nice that a relatively large batch did come in.
The swell up front's kind of interesting.
Where's that?
On the barrel.
Oh, that's the grenade ring.
Yeah, where the grenade ring kind of mounts to that.
Yeah, it's a standard barrel. It's got the unique finish to it, but it is a standard PE90 barrel, which will be cold hammer forged, 1 in 10 twist rate. Interestingly, they're not chrome lined, probably to give greater accuracy. Plus the quality of the steel is so high, and I think in Switzerland you're just expected to clean your guns, so yeah.
Ambi safety selector.
Yep.
Nice.
That's all pretty well normal. And again, these have the standard bipod, which is not great, but if you do find a different bipod, and over in Switzerland there's kind of a whole cottage industry accessorizing the PE90 because of how popular they are. So any bipod, any rear sight can be put on. And of course they're imported as pistols, but once you own one, do what you want.
Yeah, I see what he was talking about with the kind of the flat face trigger. User Antigonus has a question that says, what are your personal collecting priorities or goals at this point, other than the brand new stuff which comes to market? Is there anything that you're hunting for or saving up for, or has been kind of a kind of a long-term goal, or something that's always been on the back burner for when you happen to come across one? Or
I think I'll bat about anything you're kind of looking for. Anything you'd like to pick up in 2022?
I mean, There are a couple of PCCs I'm looking at. I would like to get my hands on one of the FM guns that's out. But I don't really know what's on the horizon enough to have something I'm dead set on.
Yeah, I'm kind of.
It seems like his question was more geared towards
old guns.
Is there a hole in your collection somewhere?
I've been really fortunate. Picked up a collection of guns in May of 2020 and actually filled a couple of holes with that. For example, I always wanted a Steyr-Mannlicher 1888 just because I like the straight pull action, and there happened to be one in it, which is not a common gun. This was before the Royal Tiger guns came in. And another gun I kind of always wanted was a Hungarian 9840, and believe it or not, then one of those was there. And it's kind of odd because that collection wasn't made of rare guns. It just happened to have, of its rare guns, it happened to have the ones that I didn't have. It was good timing, meant to be. There's always things. Let me think real quick. My Japanese I feel really good about. I like to get a Type 1 carbine, which is the side folding stock version. The problem is A, they're super expensive, and B, there are a lot of really well done fakes out there. And I wouldn't mind a fake if I wasn't paying original prices.
Sure.
I wouldn't mind. A friend essentially gave me. I paid him for it, but he gave me a really good deal. A model 1912 Winchester trench gun. I wouldn't mind finding, say, a model 37 Ithaca trench gun, the Vietnam era, but again, those are pretty few and far between. I wouldn't mind getting one of the Italian M1 Grands in 308, not a BM59, but an actual M1 Grand. They were around, but I just wasn't going to pay $2,100. I just, they're probably worth it, but not to me. Hey, I'd love to have a FAMAS, but that's not going to happen. I'd say the biggest holes in my collection are ones that will never get filled, and that would be a Japanese Type 64 battle rifle and a Japanese Type 89 assault rifle, because some automatic versions were never made.
Right.
Sad, but yeah.
Understandable, though.
Yeah. I do have one of the Beretta AR 7090 kits that I will build up one day. That was one I wanted for a long time. But I've been really happy with what I've got. I've kind of been in this weird state of mind. It's something I'm not terribly familiar with. I think it's called contentment. I don't want to sell anything. I'm not bored with guns at all. But I just kind of look at what I've got and think I'm really fortunate and happy and grateful, and just kind of want to maintain where I'm at now. I don't know. It's not a bad feeling to be content, but.
Well, and there's buy to collect, and then there's buy to sell.
Well, that's the business. I think he was asking about me, my collection. So
yeah.
I'm thinking
what would
for
really,
me,
what would really either sentimentally or historically really be your cup of tea.
I found really the last couple of years I found the Chinese Type 56S2. I've been looking for one of those. I finally got another M78 Valmet, which was the RPK version. I actually sold my original one when we bought this house to help pay for it. So that was nice to replace.
That one made an appearance not too long ago, didn't it?
Probably.
Yeah. Antigonus also wanted to know how to remove the bipod from an AR-70, not the 7090, the original.
Oh, darn it.
He was able to get the legs off of it, but...
Yeah, I nabbed the AR-70. It's over there. But anyway, you know what they look like. Actually, probably the video before this one, even though it was kind of old stock, was comparing the AR-70 to a 550, just like that Bloom we looked at. So they're really cool guns. They're neat, and I'm excited to do the 7090.
I can go get it.
It's fine. I really don't know. That's actually a part of the gas block. Now, getting the gas block off is super easy on that gun because it actually comes off for disassembly. So every time I've swapped them around, I've just removed the whole gas block unit. But a friend of mine has built those from the numeric kits. He would know. He works nights, so I wasn't able to call him before doing this video, but I will probably, by the time this video is up, have talk with him. So I will have an answer for you. I'll post it in the comments, or you can shoot me an email. So I don't know, but I know who does know. Cool guns, though. I'm glad you have one. I really like them.
Okay, user Wolfie wants to say thank you for continuing to put out great content.
Hi, Wolfie.
And in your opinion, what's the best way to mount an optic on a wood furniture AK so you get the added performance without sacrificing having that cool retro look?
Yeah, and that's actually why I brought this gun out here. I really am happy with this. I'm hoping we'll get out and shoot it soon, but just a great AKM type, the WBP jack. And yeah, retro wood gun. Now, of course, the Foxeye, they had the Barrel style mount here and here. For this one, they don't. And you obviously don't want to do a railed handguard or a scout mount to keep your original. So your best option, in my opinion, is the side rail. And most modern AKs, even a lot of the builds, have the side rail. And that's okay, because classic AKMs were made with the side rail, be it the AKML or the AKMN. While it wasn't standard, it was still an option. The dust covers that have rails on them, they don't tend to hold zero very well. You have to remove them for cleaning. And half the time when people put them on their guns, they stick their original top cover somewhere safe and lose it, and then that's bad because this is a matching part to the gun. So I would just stick with the side rail. It's a good option. It's riveted to the receiver, so it's not going to shift. And on a properly made factory gun, it'll line up Jim Dandy. I'm trying to think if there's any other options, but aside from changing the hand guards or getting a Fox and using the Barrel style over arcing mount, yeah, side rails is the best way, and it's probably why the Russians did it. Just doesn't require a lot of modification. It's solidly mounted. Or you could always just duct tape it to your gun.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Bungee cords.
There you go, duct tape and JB Weld.
A little Gorilla Glue.
Yeah.
That'll be fine. You can bubba it up with the best of them.
Yeah, like on this one, I've got a Russian Cobra sight set aside for when we go shoot it. Just slide it right on, but at the range it'll look a little modern, but take it off and the gun keeps its classic good looks.
You know me, I'm not much of an AK guy, but I do.
You know what though? More of an AK than a Makarov guy.
That's very true. I'm more of a just about anything guy than a Makarov.
I would say I'm going to change his mind, but I've been working on him for 20 years, and you see how much progress I've made.
That's the most goddamn uncomfortable gun. In any case, that pretty much gets through our list of questions for the day.
But the good news is we were able to answer it after SHOT Show, and I'm able to say that there wasn't a whole lot that I don't know how much you followed the SHOT Show. Not a lot stuff.
I talked to a couple of people and read a couple of reviews, and other than that, I think it's almost like everybody went into it with low expectations.
Yeah. I know for Arsenal, I talked with them before and during the show, and the only real new thing is they're going to be offering the rail system from their SAM-7 SF94E on other guns, or even sold by itself. So it's kind of very similar to the Barrel mount. That's their biggest news. There were those custom shotguns for them with the cerakote finish, be it black or gray or FDE. Actually, I did a video on those at the beginning of January. Not a whole lot new from them, but that's okay. At least there's no AK-20 crap again. WBP, there's some neat stuff coming from them, but they don't typically rely on SHOT Show to talk about their stuff. For example, they've released their 5.56 pistol, and there's more to come after that. JDI, we talked about it at the beginning of the video. Swiss guns, we already know what's coming there, but that was announced really after SHOT Show. You know what's odd? Century Arms, and I've talked to a few people. I'm sure they had a booth there, but whatever they did there does not seem to have made much of an impact, and that's odd. Typically, Century's a pretty noticeable presence at SHOT Show.
Strange.
I don't know what they're up to. PSA's got a few new things, but they always do. And like I said earlier, I would say the Hellion bullpup is probably the most interest to me, and probably the most interest to a lot of people that watch this channel. IWI, that's another one. They didn't have a lot either, and typically in the past, IWI has had something new for SHOT Show, and they were there, but I don't know. Yeah, we'll have to just kind of wait and see.
All right. Well.
Yeah.
Well, you'll wait.
Yeah.
Wait and see.
So yeah, guys, appreciate all that. As like I said at the beginning, Patreon support is greatly appreciated. A buck and up, you can ask questions, and we try to get to them when we can. And $5 and up, a little more involved. You can request videos, and $10 and up.
Preferably videos about guns.
Usually they're about cats.
Oh yeah?
Sometimes about food. And then $10 and up, basically it's a direct communication. Like for example, the question we kind of started this video off with was from a $10 guy who just called before we started recording to get it in. But basically another guy was asking me for the last couple of months about Valmets and good prices and stuff, and so.
Does $10 get your phone number?
Pretty much, yeah. Certainly email, and if we need to talk on the phone, we can, because sometimes it really is easier.
Sure.
Kind of just a consultant type thing. So I'm happy to do it. So that's the dealio, guys, for Dewey. But be back from vacation soon, working on new videos. Going to be shooting this. Definitely going to get our hands on a Hellion. Got a couple of other things coming from Arms of America. And a couple of little projects to finish up. So as always, feel free to comment. There will be a link to the Patreon in the description. And I think it's about dinner time.
I think it is.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.